Hi, welcome back to another episode of Wilken and Gutton's Plan, the Balance Sheet Breakdown. Today we're going to be talking through some of the possible things to consider come year end when it comes to estates, trusts, and gifting. I'm Chris Frederick, a partner with the firm, and joining me again on today's episode is the leader of our estate and trust group, Brian Geissler. Brian, this is your third episode this year. Thanks for being my most popular, most frequent guest. This is great.
Thanks for having me.
So back in June, right, we did an episode that really focused on what is the annual gifting exemption. What do those exemptions look like, and maybe how they come into play. We're coming to the end of a calendar year, right, and most tax rules, the calendar year matters. What should we be thinking about as we get through December here?
Okay, so the simple things are the annual exclusion gifts. So every individual, every taxpayer can give $17,000 to anybody they like. You give it to a kid, give it to their grandkid, their neighbor, their friend at church. It doesn't matter. $17,000 can go out scot-free. And what that does is it gets that $17,000 out of your estate. So if you're trying to bring your estate down, $17,000 comes scot-free. It doesn't eat into your exemption. Everybody's got right now the $13 million exemption approximately. So the 17 that you give to somebody doesn't eat into that exemption. And the beauty of it is it's $17,000 for anybody. So, simplistic purposes, you have 3 kids, they each have 3 kids. That's $17,000 for all those people. You can get out in 1 year, and then if you're married, you can double that to be $34,000.
Your spouse can give the same 17.
Correct. Or you can give the 34, and it's deemed it comes from the spouse.
Okay.
So you're talking you can get $200,000-$300,000 out of your estate just by year-end gifting. By December 31st.
Well, and so you mentioned the kind of that lifetime exclusion. What did you say? $6 million, around $6 million today.
Well, right. It was doubled back a few years ago. So that's the one that's sunset. So it's $5 million goes to $10 million, but it's indexed for inflation is now almost $13 million a taxpayer.
When does that sunset get to happen?
It sunsets at the end of 2025 potentially.
So that's barring some new legislation, right? That if that goes back from 13 back to 6 back to 7.
Yep.
Those may be dollars above that threshold. Hey, if get those out of someone's estate today into that next generation without risking them to the IRS, why would you not?
Absolutely correct. And again, this year-end gifting are simple things you can do. They don't have to be well planned out. They could just be last-minute gifts. They just have to get to the donee, and the donee has to present these simple gifts to the bank to cash them. But there's other things you can do. You can always do the education expenses. Any individual, again, can pay direct educational expenses for anyone as long as they pay it directly. It doesn't come out of that $13 million exemption, and they can get money out of their estate. And again, the idea is if you have that big of an estate, you want to bring the estate down. So if that person does pass away, you're not paying estate tax. Estate tax is 40 cents on the dollar based on your assets at death. So again, it's a quick example of right now, it's your grandmother's worth $15 million, and she's relatively old. It's possible, she might have an estate tax in the next few years. So what do you want to do? You might want to get gifts out of her hand into other people's hands, and ideally, you'd get gifts out of cash, because again, the rule is at death, we'll have it stepped up based on all their assets to go to the beneficiaries. So if grandma, grandpa, whatever has assets to get rid of, cash are the simple ones to do.
It's grandma that has 3 children. Each one has 3 grandchildren. We're talking about 12 people. She can give a couple $100,000 away without eating into her annual exclusion.
Correct.
Do that for a few years. You're at $1 million. All of a sudden, you're really making some meaningful changes. And 40%'s a lot.
Right, and you would think that's the way it would go anyway at death. It's just going a little earlier.
Right.
Yeah, right. And the ways to effectuate that is you can give the cash now, or you could put it into trusts. And trust for the kids. Obviously, you don't want to give your grandkids $34,000 a year. I mean, they're going to buy a lot of.
Right. At 15, I'd have 15, 16, I'd have had the nicest, newest car.
Correct.
That the dealer would have sold me.
Yeah. So you can use trusts to fund those. Again, it's administratively burdensome, perhaps, But again, you're saving 40 cents on the dollar
Yeah.
if there ever was tax.
There's still some control, right? So it's like you said, if depending on the generation, we could be talking about some young kids. Hey, we're saving the 40% of the potential tax on the estate, and we're also not giving them kind of carte blanche.
Correct. So grandma will set up a trust, and you have to pick a trustee. The trustee is a person that obviously grandma trusts and will take this trust document and effectuate it properly, distribute the assets appropriately, and according to the terms of the trust, do what's asked. The idea would be is that person would, obviously not give willy-nilly to the
Right.
your grandkid, 13-year-old,
Right. If
$30,000 to go buy a pair of shoes.
Right.
So the idea is they pick the trustee you trust, and
If that were my family, I know, and my mother were the trustee over my estate as a minor, I assure you, me and I think most competent parents wouldn't be, shelling out any sorts of sums of monies with commas in them to buy,
Correct.
the newest, latest sneaker or, whatever the latest fad is. So it gives you that protection.
right. So most trusts, they suggest HEMS is health, education, medical, and support. So the trustee would probably most likely, you would think, give only when it's required.
Right.
So,
Right. Well, and so you mentioned education, right? And so the grandparent in maybe our running example can write the check without impacting the $17,000 annual limit, without impacting their exemption pay for school.
Yep.
But if they're really young kids, still in public middle school, and you want to start transferring the wealth, what you're talking about with an education type of trust, certainly makes a lot of sense.
correct. And the other thing is there's a 529 plan you can do. I think it's called Superfunding.
Okay.
You could fund 5 years worth of your exemptions in 1 year. So great grandma could give, I think it's $85,000, one shot to a 529 plan for each of her grandkids. So again, 3 grandkids, you almost get $300,000 out for 5 years worth of gifts for each grandkid all at one time. Now, obviously, you fund it earlier, it's going to grow that much faster. So if the kid's 10 years old and you hadn't done it for the last 5 years, you've now effectively
a
got
little
5
bit of a
years
catch up.
gifts.
Yep.
So it's good planning. And again, simple things to do at year end to bring your estate down and get gifts out.
I think that's the important part, right? I know in our June episode we touched on a few of these items, but hey, June's the middle of the year. It's not, nothing seems so pressing, but I feel like with most tax planning type of items, as we get closer to December 31st, the clock really starts ticking. It's not like an IRA or something where you can make a contribution up to April 15th of the subsequent year and roll it back, right? It's cash has got to be in the hands of the recipients of these gifts.
Correct. There's a 65-day rule, so the trust doesn't get the money out before the year end. We can also get the income out by making a distribution with the 65% election you make. So by 65 days after year end, you can get that cash out, get it to individual that should have or could have got to them, and then take the income out of that trust. And again, you want to do that because trusts, or you don't necessarily want to do it, but for income tax purposes, it might make sense.
Yeah, it makes,
because trusts max tax rate at 37% right now is at like $14,000. So if you can get, that money out of the trust and put it into the kids' hands, obviously their tax rates are.
I'm sure they're not. If they're at that top marginal rate, God bless them, right? It's
it does affect because kiddie tax kicks in if they're young enough, but if the parents, still parents have to be at the max rate as well. So there's planning to be done, and again, like you said, year end makes difference. Giving gifts, making distributions out of trusts, so on and so forth.
And so kind of thinking about trust, right? We talked a bit about one of the reasons maybe to consider putting gifts into trust is to protect the kids from themselves. Mm-hmm. Does putting gifts into trust also maybe protect those assets from predators and creditors? What else can a trust do for folks?
Yeah, so again, you have funders of trust, the grantors of trust, that know what's happening, what's going on, and if you have children and you want to protect them from their spouses to be or their ex-former spouses, however you want to say it, there's trusts are set up for that purpose because legally they have no rights to that trust. So again, you have a spouse, your grandkid has a spouse, you're not sure how it's going, you put money into a trust. If you give them outright, it's fair game for potential divorce. But if you put it into trust, there's no real right for the ex-spouse or ex-future spouse, however you want to call it, to get a hold of that.
And I'm sure we've never seen a situation, right, where an ex-future spouse or somebody tried to stake their claim, to some, previous familial wealth or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I mean, especially wealthy families, you want to protect yourselves. I mean, they have reasons to fund trusts, and reasons could be just that.
Yeah.
You don't want to give your family's money away to again, potentially future ex-spouse.
And that's what's about, protecting your assets from others, protecting your assets from the eventual beneficiary.
And it's sometimes protecting the beneficiary from themselves. Again, if you make distributions to the beneficiary and they're not financially sound, they're going to waste the money.
Right.
So that's why you have trustee to limit that and to potentially keep an eye on it. And it's like a security guard for the trust. That
ability to make some distributions post year end, to shift the tax burden right from the trust to the individual, where it doesn't always make sense. It's
sometimes
you might save 15% on that on the marginal tax rate, but
you're losing the money.
Right. When it's all, would you rather have lose 15% of $100,000, or would you rather lose 100% of $100,000?
Right. So trustees have an important job to do. That's why they're chosen to be the trustee for reasons.
For sure.
There's a perfect example right there, because if you're just talking about income tax planning, it makes one sense. So then you're also trying to protect the beneficiary and the trust corpus. That's a different example.
Yeah, so, I mean, and right, I feel like this end of year period is when we maybe see the most folks taking a fresh look with their advisors at what the purpose of these trusts are set up for, how they're being administrated. Is the trustee meeting what the expectations are for the trust, and hey, making any changes, good, bad, or indifferent.
Correct. And we all work in conjunction together. You have the attorneys that prepare the trust and discuss how the trust terms should be set. You have the accountants and you have the financial advisors, and we all work in conjunction together to make sure the needs, the wants, and the desires of the grantor who formed the trust are done properly.
For sure, right, and kind of bringing it back to what you mentioned earlier, it's not just about the tax ramifications, and it's not just about what the trust docs maybe say on paper. It's not just about what the investment advisor's advising. It's really important that the whole team is on the same page moving forward.
Yep.
There's a lot of maybe hot button points out there on on Instagram and whatnot, providing this off the cuff tax advice. Ways to mitigate taxes. Where I feel like within the maybe estates and trust realm, they might be good sound bites, but with how wide of a range that trust can be, such guidance doesn't necessarily exist.
Correct, 100%.
Any maybe final thoughts? Anything we want to hammer home? I feel like maybe with what we started off the annual exemptions, and with December 31st around the corner is really the key takeaway here. Yeah,
and like you said, it's the year end, good time of the year to check with your attorney, check with your accountant, check with your financial advisor, think about what it is that you want, and let's get it done.
I think that's a great soundbite to end it on. So I'm Chris Frederick of Wilken & Gutton Plans, the Balance Sheet Breakdown, where we help you make sense of the numbers.